Hello, what is up, everyone? Another episode of Records and Rants. We got a little bit of a kind of a little more sad topic, but we have the expert here to help us out. Dixon, how the heck are you?
Ice. Great to be back, but our purpose today isn't all that pleasant, as our listeners may know, as you may know. Actually, you didn't know. I had to tell you just hours before. Pop genius.
Yeah,
pop
really.
Genius, musical genius.
Really calling me out right at the beginning. Well, you know what? You're right. You're right. I did. Yeah. I started scrolling through Reels. So I'm like, wow, people really like this guy.
Oh my goodness. Brian Wilson, leader of the Beach Boys, musical, like I said, musical genius.
Yes.
Probably the one of the greatest composers, songwriters, musicians of his generation, if not the greatest, has passed away at the age of 81. And it was this past week, and 82. Mm-hmm. And so it's been interesting because there's a lot of tributes pouring in. And the reason why we're bringing this up is because we've documented some of Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys music on this very channel. And it actually, our review and our breakdown of Smile is one of our top viewed videos.
Yes.
The Smile, I guess, not the Smile reissue, but the 2004 version of Smile. So yeah, that's what brings us here today.
Yeah, I was actually, I went back to that video and, yeah, that was one of our, I think that was one of our first videos that got a lot of traction.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
In the other Beach Boys video that got a lot of traction was Beach Boys Friends. It's that we said is the most underrated of all time because it's kind of a departure from the big type of kind of production that had been known, that Brian Wilson was known for. Mm-hmm. And so it was interesting. But actually, there's want to get into a comment of the week.
Yes, yeah. Let's get into it.
All right. Let's change things up. Let's get into our comment of the week with Ice and Dixon. So, this is actually pretty relevant. This is actually we didn't cover this comment. This is on our friend's video because we were looking through some of the old uploads that we had, and this is from a guy Art Apollo 3367. This is from a year ago, and he said. It talks about Friends, Be Here in the Morning, TM, Annalie, all great Brian Wilson songs. Brian actually was attempting to have a comeback with this album and ended up being one of their worst selling albums of all time. And then Brian really gave up after that. So, kind of puts that in perspective, really. And then, so let's wrap up our comment of the week, and let's get it. Let's use that as a springboard because So in reality, you had I think what has been said and what needs to be said more often is that Brian Wilson was way ahead of his time as far as production. Mm-hmm. Now, you are a producer of music, right? You use some software to do those things. Is that correct?
Of course. Yes. And
you layer tracks, you put things on top of one another, you move things around. The software kind of makes it easy, right?
Very simple. Yes.
So back in the day, and Brian Wilson and Phil Spector, along with Brian Wilson, Phil Spector kind of had this LA sound, this wall of sound where you're using the studio as an instrument. And Brian Wilson really took that and ran with it. So he would record parts of albums at one studio because of how it sounded there. And then they would go next door to a different studio and record a part there. And when they were recording Smile, he actually was taking like the actual tape reels and cutting them and taping them together with like Scotch tape to layer sounds. And that was just unheard of at the time. And that was 60, 70, 60 years ago that he's trying to do this kind of work. And now this is the norm. And so it was trying to utilize and trying to do something, technology that didn't even exist yet, which is just insane to me.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that story in one of our past videos. And I thought that was very, very interesting. I mean, yeah, like you said, you're getting someone who's doing something that hasn't even been invented yet, and now we have programs that could do it easily. But just the idea to do something like that back then, and to have because like even down to like the technicality of doing something like that, all analog stuff like that, and then to really be into it, like you have to know your way around not only the music
Right.
but the equipment that you're using. So I don't know. I always thought I like that story because I think it's pretty impressive and it really shows his
Yeah.
production mindset and just kind of like how genius he is, really.
Right. No, and that's the truth to it. And it's interesting because, obviously these mental health struggles were a thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
like the Beach Boys started in 1961. And by 1965, 66, Brian Wilson, his schizophrenia is taking hold. He has this lack of confidence. He doesn't believe in what he's doing. He takes a backseat from touring and being on the road. And he was replaced by Glenn Campbell at one point, all these kind of different things. And so the band was doing the tour and he was back in the studio. And that's what ended up happening with Pet Sounds.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout his whole career, watching documentaries, and my new wife and I were just talking about this the other day. We said, one of the documentaries we were watching, without his mental illness and his use of psychedelics, it's doubtful that he would have attained the level of musicianship or production that he was trying to get to anyway, or did.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it's either you're a genius and you suffer, or you just don't create anything. And that's what it seems like. But my wife made a good point. She said, well, did he really suffer? Because that's what he knew. That's where we were. That's what he was doing.
Oh,
So that's kind of an interesting point. So it's just one of those things that he actually might have unlocked and used to his full potential to kind of really isolate and focus and those kind of things. But in a 2015 or 2019, GQ did a portrait on him, and they said, do you have any regrets? And he said, I regret taking drugs. I wish I never took drugs.
Wow.
And there's some people on the opposite camp that said, oh, Brian Wilson without psychedelics is not Brian Wilson. You don't get Pet Sounds. You don't get Smile. You don't get Good Vibrations. You don't get any of these things. But in reality, his genius was still there. So it's an interesting debate.
Yeah, I was I was going to ask you, like, do you think that's true? Do you think that he needed, and I mean, maybe he's already come out and said this, that he's written all this stuff when he was on psychedelics, but
Right.
like, has he said that? Is that true?
Well, so it definitely created. So without, and this was supposed to be a quick episode. We can go on forever. I could go on forever. So when he's recording Smile, he has all these like friends around him, and they're basically just using him, right? And he's kind of a good-natured guy. So in his house in LA, he puts in a sandbox, and he has this tent where they would go in and smoke hash and talk about music and this kind of stuff. He starts to get more paranoid now. He thinks Phil Spector is spying on him, so he would meet with the Beach Boys in his pool or in the back of a car.
Huh.
And
Wow.
his mental health slowly deteriorated from that point. So you can make the argument that it made things worse, but in reality, his mental illness on top of what he was experimenting with
I see.
made it worse. And I know we've talked about the story on the show before, but when he was recording Smile, which was projected to be the greatest album ever, the Beatles wrote Revolver, and so the Beach Boys wrote Pet Sounds in response, and then the Beatles wrote Sgt. Pepper in response to Pet Sounds, and Brian Wilson was working on Smile in response to Sgt. Pepper.
Mhm.
And in the midst of one of the recording sessions, he was recording this song called Mrs. O'Leary's Cow, and it's supposed to be like fire. It's like an element suite. It sounds like
yes,
fire.
I remember this. Yeah,
Yes, and then the building next door burned down.
yeah.
And it freaked him out. It just completely freaked him out. So he shelved the project, and that was it. And so he slowly starts to deteriorate more. He then laid in bed for like 3 years solid. Really was kind of like an absent father, didn't do much. And I really want to talk about this on the show at some point, but he became obsessed with the song Shortening Bread. So there's just these he would sit at the piano for hours and just play the opening songs of Shortening Bread, which is this old song from like the 20s, 30s, 40s probably.
Mm-hmm.
And you've heard it before. It's basically like a kid's song, but there's this hours and hours like bootlegs that have like him singing it with his brothers and him playing it here. It's like just hours of Shortening Bread. Like the legend of Shortening Bread and the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson is a pretty interesting story.
That is so bizarre.
Yeah, he came up with he just had this. He was obsessed with those notes, and he would play them over and over and over again.
Man, he's a very interesting guy because, this is it goes back to what you said when he laid in his room for like 3 years, and I saw a clip of an interview of him talking about that. What was that related to? Was that his depression?
Yeah, like
or
this just total like mental breakdown. He wasn't interested in music. Pet Sounds in reality wasn't like really well received.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
shelved Smile. He's there. He's having more blows to his confidence, and his mental health is deteriorating. And I'm sure his abuse of substances didn't help. He gained a ton of weight. And at one point he had at one point they set up a studio in his house so he could just record in his house. Cause they're like, okay, like Brian, like make some music for us. And he'd come up with these goofy songs. Like they weren't even like, I mean, as far as modern standards go or mainstream standards go. And at one point he just would get up, he'd be playing Short and Bread, and he'd just take all of his gold records off the wall and just start handing them out to random people. Like it was just like, it was just random. Yeah. But so, and then they had the Beach Boys. And then Brian comes back and he starts touring again. And he's definitely fragile. He's in a fragile state. And he starts touring against the Beach Boys as a band have this song, Brian is Back. And the lyric is, oh, well, Brian's back. I never knew that he was gone. Well, I mean, he was, he had some issues. Let's be honest, the poor guy, you know?
That's pretty sad. That's kind of like an insult to him. I don't know. Why would they do that to him? Yeah.
Well, because everybody wanted Brian to be back, and they said, okay, Brian's back. I never knew that he was gone. And so he's been in the band. That's what their whole logic was. Is he's been around here. What are you guys talking about? You know?
Okay. I see.
And then creative differences, everything else. So he gets on the radar of this psychiatrist who just basically medicated him. He's actually has a co-production credit on his solo album from '88. And he just completely medicated him, actually completely threw him for a loop. And thank God Brian Wilson met his wife, who passed away a few years ago, and she kind of rescued him from that and got him the mental health help he needs, and got him on a regimen. And that psychiatrist, Landy, actually ended up losing his license. But to go back to your question, is did he need psychedelics? So the last studio album the Beach Boys wrote was That's Why God Made the Radio. I think it was 2011 or 2012. It's a good album. It's a good listen. And there is a component of the suite. He was working on this Pacific Coast Highway suite, and a portion of that was on the album. And we haven't heard the other portions. There's supposed to be a few different movements to it. And Brian is in his 70s, you know, and he wrote this beautiful, complex, layered song with very impactful lyrics. It's a short snippet, but it's good. I'll actually send it to you. You should listen to it. And that was Brian Wilson in his current state, with proper intervention, with solid family life stability, and it was still beautiful. So what does that tell you? Probably not. You know, probably he didn't need anything that he was under the influence of.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, in my opinion, that's reassuring. I kind of like that. I don't like the idea of having to take like all these psychedelics and stuff. I don't know that.
Right.
Something about it just rubs you the wrong way. I mean, I'm fine if these artists want to do it, but
right.
Just the idea from your own brain that you could come up with this stuff, and that's always what I thought too. But it is pretty interesting. But yeah, send me that clip. I'd like to listen to it.
We'll do. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. So, but so it's really it's because you knew this day was going to come, and that's the thing is they have these older guys that are touring. You got to go see them when you can, because this is
you're right.
You're on borrowed time here, unfortunately. But so I mean, in reality, Brian Wilson, my parents gave me the foundation of music, and that's one of the many things I'm grateful for that they gave me. And the centerpiece of that foundation was the Beach Boys and the music of Brian Wilson. And awesome. This day I'm a fan. That was my first concert when I was 3 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so the soundtrack that Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys have provided for my life is it's just been incredible. And no matter what album you're listening to, no matter what you want to pick out, you notice something different, or you pick out something new, or there's a ton of background tracks that they're releasing that you haven't heard. So it's just they have such a full catalog, thanks to Brian Wilson and the rest of the band as well. So Brian, thanks for the music, really appreciate it. Do you have anything you want to say, or do you want to apologize for maybe some of the comments?
I knew this was going to happen. I knew you were going to come at me just because I didn't like pet sounds. And you know what? I was listening to Smile in preparation for this while I was doing something else, and I'm like, and again, I appreciate it. Maybe not my kind of music, but that's just how it is. I was actually gonna.
Okay, then thanks everybody.
Well,
Not how it is. All right, good night.
Listen. Hey, at least I'm not like this guy. And this is here. This is a very rare, I think, never before done. Second comment of the week, follow up comment of the week.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Now did you see this one? It was from Paul Axe on the Pet Sounds album.
No, I don't think I saw it.
It's just so this is from Paul Axe. The title of the video is "The Beach Boys' Pet Sounds is Bad," and obviously we didn't think that. I mean, well,
you thought that.
Dixon certainly didn't think. But this guy responds. His name is Paul Axe. He says, "It suck," with the laughing emoji. It is the worst thing ever. Can you believe the funniest thing is you go to his profile picture, and it's just some old guy holding drumsticks. That's that's Paul Axe. That's the people. And you know what? Then I saw that, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should rethink my opinion on Pet Sounds. When I saw that guy.
Oh my gosh. That's really something else. But you know, I'm going to show you some grace, and I'm going to show you the grace that you deserve. You at least said, and I'm making this comment for you because you don't seem to be saying anything nice, but that's okay. You respected the production, the idea, the craftsmanship, those kind of things.
Yes, and that's when I couldn't find the words, but that's exactly what I meant to say. You know what? Just let's let bygones be bygones, and let's wrap this up in a nice way, Dixon. I want to ask you this question because you're the expert, and I know that you'd have an answer. This is probably actually going to be kind of tough, a little cliche, but if you could pick out one thing that one of the best thing that Brian Wilson did for the art of music, whether that be like an album or his contribution to pop music, anything like that, what would you, if you had to pick one thing, what would it be?
Wow, that's
I know.
really
I know.
Interesting.
I know it's gonna be tough.
That's a good question, but I would sum it up as, so Brian Wilson, even though he lacked, he thought what he was doing wasn't good enough, and he had this kind of feud in his head with the Beatles and other artists that I have to keep pushing. Where am I going? What am I doing? I can make better music, and sometimes he believed it, and sometimes he didn't. But in reality, he always said, "Trust yourself. Push the envelope. If you believe in what you're doing, do it." And so when Brian Wilson walks into Capitol Records with the Beach Boys, who are the top-selling American group, they have a string of maybe not number one hits, but they have a string of hits, albums. They're competing directly with the Beatles, and they're all about basically cars and girls and surfing. And he says, I'm going to start the idea of the album, like an album, a complete album where things fit in, like Taylor Swift tries to do, where things work together and fit in. They were developed by Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, the Beatles, bands like this, Bob Dylan. And you walk into Capitol Records, you say, I'm going to do this album, and it's a concept, and we're going to write it and see how it goes. And they're like, what? Like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? But he believed in that. He believed in that concept. He believed in pushing the envelope and challenging himself and the creativity of his band and what he was capable of. So that's the biggest contribution, is to believe in what you're doing, do it. Don't be afraid to question.
Wow.
There you go.
That's awesome. That's really nice. And you know what? I agree.
There you go.
just
wonderful.
There you go.
We're on the same page. So.
Perfect. We are on the same page. So yeah, again, sad to see Brian Wilson go. But that, you know what, Dixon, this was nice. This was a nice little recap that we had, trying to summarize, his great impact that he had on the music industry.
Yep. I don't know if you can summarize it, but we did our best, and it is what it is. So I think that to be alive at the same time, Brian Wilson, that was a special thing.
There you go.
And we'll cherish the music. Will live forever, just like these episodes will live forever, which is great.
Exactly. So guys, episodes every single week. Well, not always, sometimes, but we're gonna keep going. We might take a little hiatus. I think someone on the tech team, I think, is on vacation next week, so we might have to have a little break. But we will definitely be back by the end of the month. So guys, keep listening, keep subscribing, keep liking. Let us know what you think about Brian Wilson, and we will see you in the next one.
Peace.